Hi, good day. My name is Mark Deuze. I'm a professor of media studies at the University of Amsterdam. You're tuning in to hopefully yet another episode of my Deuze vlog. It's a series of interviews, conversations I have, each of about an hour long, with media professionals and academics from around the world who study or are advocates of all things related to promoting creativity, happiness, innovation in media organizations and media work. And specifically in this series, I'm looking at issues around mental health in creative careers. And to that effect, today I'm talking to Mar Cabra, a Spanish investigative journalist, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist for her work in the famous Panama Papers investigations, who in 2020 co-founded an organization called The Self-Investigation, a charity dedicated to promoting and supporting the mental health and well-being of journalists in newsrooms around the world. It's an organization that provides online resources, training and workshops, educational materials, in-company advice and support, specifically for people in leadership and management positions. One of the things Mar and I will be talking about is, and if you're listening to this before that date, be sure to tune in to the second iteration of the Self-Investigation's annual Mental Health in Journalism Summit. That's coming up on October 8th, 9th, and 10th of this year, 2025. After last year's successful summit with well over 100 speakers and so many more attendees, all these sessions still available online to watch. Our conversation talks about a variety of issues, the history of the self-investigation, and Mar's own personal confrontation with depression and burnout related to the work as a journalist, and reflecting on the fact that so many of the incredible support and research that goes into this topic, mental health and media work, comes from people who themselves have had intense personal experiences with these issues and now dedicate their professional lives, as Mar does, to helping others, which is a fundamental aspect of mental health literacy, something that she passionately advocates for in her work. We're talking about having to deal with digital overwhelm, with the dark side of being passionate, of loving what you do as a journalist, as a media professional. We're talking about how discussions around mental health and well-being have finally come out of the closet in news organizations and indeed media companies around the world, but they've yet to become part of just the mainstream professional package on the basis of which any kind of media company or organization is run. And that is definitely the next hurdle, the next bridge to cross for the work in this area. I sincerely hope you enjoy our conversation. If you hear this in time, please make sure to join the Mental Health and Journalism Summit online. The link will be in the show notes today, and we'll promote it across all our social platforms. Check out Mar Cabra's work, and I hope to see you in one of these other episodes of Conversations.
So, I'm ready.
Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I mean, you're right in front of the next big mental health summit. I mean, so much going on. So I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. Thanks so much, Mark. And maybe before anything else, maybe just if you don't mind, I would love to hear a little bit from you about the road that you've taken with the self-investigation. I mean, it's been around now for about 5 years, I guess. I mean, it started around the pandemic and your own personal experiences, and you co-founded it, of course, with a group of colleagues. Now it's become such a force that everybody in one way or another knows about or talks about. I mean, how do you look back on those 5 years and sort of the role that this organization now plays also in your life, let alone in the life of newsrooms around the world?
Mental health is a taboo topic in our society.
Hmm.
However, the pandemic opened up the door a little bit to the conversation, and some of us have just like put our foot in the door to try to open it even wider. Um, at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of colleagues contacted me saying, "Hey, I think I'm struggling. I think I'm having mental health challenges." And the reason why they contacted me is because I had burnt out a few years earlier. And at the beginning of my career, I had depression that was also work related.
Right.
So my inner circle, which was a global team of journalists, knew my personal connections with mental health and my own personal challenges. So they came to me for advice. And I was just not the right person to support. So I joined forces at that moment. And I joined forces with the coach that helped me recover from burnout, and also another colleague who was another coach and is now a psychologist, to create courses to support journalists. That was the beginning of the pandemic. We just needed tools to deal with stress and stress management and digital overwhelm,
Mm.
and of course with all the potential trauma associated with covering one of the key moments of history in current society that was affecting our dear ones, right? So
Right.
we started just doing courses and seeing more and more people asking for support. That's how we created the Self Investigation as a nonprofit that would support the mental health of journalists and media professionals all around the world. 5 years in, we've supported more than 12,500 media professionals. And we've worked directly with media companies such as The Guardian, the AFP, and the Finnish Broadcasting Corporation. Because the reality is, Mark, and you know this very well, the mental health of journalists is at risk, and it's an urgent issue that we need to tackle.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I remember personally during the pandemic talking to journalists and also some of the journalists that would teach in our program about this profound sense of loss that they felt by not being able to go back into the newsroom, not see their colleagues, of course, freelancers being just, they just vanished from the news ecosystem almost completely, and how that didn't just feel like, oh, I miss my friends or colleagues, but a much more deeper sense of what the hell am I still doing this for? Because of course this went parallel to a rising level of public distrust and a lot of paranoia online, like you said, digital overwhelm, and 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 I really appreciate, Mara, how you share that part of what inspired all of this was your own personal experience in doing the work, winning awards for your journalistic work, and then also experiencing the sense of burnout in part because of that. And that's something that has struck me in a lot of these interviews that I've been privileged to do for this research is that so many of these initiatives, like the self-investigation in other industries like Screenwell for the film industry or Cinemind in television, Behind the Scenes Foundation in the US for cruise, came from people in those industries having had their own personal experience of running up against a brick wall or feeling getting disillusioned or in one way or another hurt by the work that they love. And is that something that you see as well? And why can't we see this coming? Like you said, it's somehow still a taboo. Is that the explanation, or how do you look at that?
Well, I'm not sure I'm able to give you the most comprehensive answer to that very key question, because I'm not fully sure about
Mm,
why that is. I think that stigma plays a big role.
right.
When I had depression at the beginning of my career, I remember distinctively that people told me, Never talk about this.
Mm.
Erase this gap from your CV. And that's still there. People told me my burnout 10 years later,
Yeah.
don't talk about your burnout. That's going to hurt your career. So yeah, stigma plays a big role. And about mental health, we tend to think it's something that happens to others.
Mm.
And there's a lot of thoughts about, oh, this is just weak. You're weak, or people are weak. They just don't have what it takes to be a journalist. I've heard this in newsrooms. Oh,
Right.
especially with young generations, right? This
Yeah.
young generation is just so breakable, and the reality is that I would dare that statement by saying maybe they're just more in tune with their emotions and with their own mental health than you are, and we've been, allow me the expression, eating shit
Mm.
for a long time within journalism that we shouldn't have. And I have so many friends that have had physical problems when they have retired, and some of them even died. And I wonder how many of those physical problems were connected with the huge amounts of levels of stress and intensity that they had lived through their jobs.
Mm.
So I guess what I can tell you is that, sure, we don't see it coming. We think it's something that happens to others. But let me tell you, if you're listening
Mm.
to this, you are going to have a mental health challenge at some point in your life, either directly, or you're going to have to deal with one either directly or indirectly through somebody near you. So mental health is more widespread than we think, and we just need to understand it in a similar way than a physical health issue, right?
Mm.
And just treat it like that, And I think that the reason to your question about why so many of these initiatives have been started by people who have had those challenges.
Right.
Well, I have to tell you, I found great comfort in supporting others not having to go through what I've gone through.
Mm.
And I didn't know that was going to be the case. When I burn out, I was decided to leave journalism and say, I'm doing something else. But, people told me, by listening to you, I now know I'm not alone.
Right.
And I think that there's so much power in listening to peers and seeing that other people like you doing your same profession, loving the profession the same way you do, have gone through these things. There's a sense of community, a sense of connectedness and relatability that it's very hard to feel just by reading about this topic, right? So,
Right.
I guess it's easier to get to people, and also it's easier for us to also heal. It's been tremendously healing for me to be able to support others.
That's such a powerful statement. I mean, and it comes through the research that I've been part of as well, is that it's one thing to have some kind of mental health or well-being challenge related to the work, but it gets so much compounded by not being able to talk about it or feeling that not seen in that way, or real feeling unsafe on top of whatever you're going through. So yeah, simply somebody sort of checking in or being or acknowledging how you feel can make a world of difference. I mean, it almost seems that these kind of comments in the newsroom, like, "Oh, if you can't handle it, you shouldn't be a journalist," that those are like coping mechanisms. That those are like ridiculous statements that you need in order to suppress your feeling. Otherwise, that's
Mhm.
not how a normal human being would respond to a friend or a peer saying, "Hey, I'm struggling," right? That's just bizarre. But it's yeah, we notice it all over the place as well among our students as well. So that's the really powerful point. And to that, to the role of taboo and stigma. I mean, in one of the years that you contributed to the famous Neiman Labs sort of predictions for what will be coming for journalism in the next year, in 2022, you wrote this beautiful essay about the inevitable mental health revolution that would be coming to newsrooms. And we're a couple of years on, especially in the recent years. I mean, from where I'm sitting, and as an academic, It certainly seems that just raising the topic of health and well-being in a newsroom isn't necessarily frowned upon all that much, much less than it was in the past. I mean, that seems to have shifted at least somewhat. I mean, what other things of this revolution that you saw coming are you picking up in your work?
So let me just say that you're pointing to a article published in a media publication.
Right.
If I were writing in a wider publication, which I have in Spain, for example, I wrote a whole column in the most important page of the paper in one of the most conservative newspapers in Spain. Um, whole opinion column, whole page, talking about the wider society, right?
Right.
I would have said the same thing. I mean, there's an inevitable mental health revolution that is happening right now.
Mhm.
Mental health has gotten out of the closet, and basically we're speaking more openly about it. And those companies who are not putting it at the center of their business as a strategic and business related value, they're missing out. That's not just in the media, that is everywhere.
Mm.
However, in some professions, they're feeling it more than others. So you're seeing big revolution happening in big four consulting firms with younger people and saying, hey, we're not going to work 80-hour weekdays, and because they have a lack of human power, they have a lack of talent, then they're addressing it. They're also addressing it because they have more money than in the media, right?
Mm.
But we're seeing in the media the same thing that we're seeing in many other professions, right? The problem is the media is a business that is in decline, business models in decline. We have a lot of precarity, and we're not putting it in the center as much as other professions are. Um, Having said that, looking back at that article, I can tell you that I've seen so much progress, not just in the past 2 years, I would say in the past 5 years. The fact that the self-investigation has supported more than 12,500 professionals around the world. We've also seen this conversation igniting in pretty much every single country. We're now hosting the Mental Health in Journalism Summit for the second year in a row with hundreds of speakers explaining what they're doing in their countries.
Mm.
That is just numbers that speak to the fact that the revolution is there, it's happening, and if you're not in it, you're missing out.
Yeah, I mean, and thanks for bringing that up. I mean, the Mental Health and Journalism Summit that last year was the first iteration. The second one is coming right up. Very powerful meeting. We recently had the Media Strong conference in London. I mean, there's other initiatives and other fields of media work outside of journalism happening as well. That certainly speaks to this revolution that you wrote about, and it's and I'm as a scholar I'm benefiting from that as well, from the publicness of data and available perspectives and people to talk with. I mean, the last year's summit, looking back, I mean, what were your main takeaways from that at the time? I mean, it was such a unique and pioneering endeavor, and it clearly set the benchmark for a lot of other people. But what did you get out of that, Mar, that you can share and that you want to bring into the second iteration of the summit?
Hmm. Well, first off, the Mental Health in Journalism Summit happening from October 8th to 10th, because it's around World Mental Health Day, which is October 10th, right? So if you're
Right.
listening to this and it's still not that date, you can go into the Self Investigations website for more info. If you're listening to this and the date has passed, don't worry. We're recording a lot of the sessions, and the recordings will be available on the Self Investigations website. Having said that, like that commercial,
Well
having done the
done.
commercial, let me answer your question. So I think that the goal last year was mostly to test the field. The program is done by the community. We ask the community to make pitches for proposals for sessions, and then we curate those pitches from the community. And we wanted to see what was out there, what were people doing, what were people hungry for. And it was amazing. We had again, more than 100 speakers, I think 170, if I'm remembering correctly, from all
Mm,
around the world. And we had people from like, Australia to like Myanmar or Burma and, to the United States or Colombia, right? So,
mm,
many different places around the world. What we saw last year was that a lot of people felt, or a lot of people understood that there was a need to talk about mental health and that there's a mental health issues in the media that are so widespread that they need tackling. And what the community has asked us this year is, okay, now we know there's a problem. We need to understand what can we do, right? So this year we've really tried to focus on solutions, on case studies, on how-tos, right? So we understand there's something to do. What can you do? So the program is focused a lot on what people are trying out. So we have psychologists talking about how they're working with newsrooms and implementing programs to do support. We're talking about organizations that are tackling hard situations like conflict situations, like many of the conflict situations we're living around the world. And we're also talking about how can we create a more constructive content that can also not only help us with their own mental health, but help the audience with their mental health, right? Because we have a big issue in the media, which is news avoidance. People don't go to the media to be informed because one of the reasons is you're too negative. You're really affecting my mental health, right? So, how can we really connect with the audience in another way so that we can support their mental health as well as we do our work? So,
mm.
solutions, um, case studies, how to's, how can we implement it? So we're going to go granular this year, and it's a really exciting program. I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely, same here. And as you told me, one of the things I think you're going to do it at the summit. I'm assuming is also releasing a report that you've been working on together with or with the European Federation of Journalists on sort of the state of affairs when it comes to mental health in the media. And so I would love to ask you about that report, but also maybe you can tell me, and forgive me for adding my perspective here, but one of the things that has come out of my own research in looking at how this topic is dealt with across various media industries is that while yes, there is a growing awareness, especially over the last 10 years, as you said, accelerated through COVID and Me Too and those kind of bigger issues of health and well-being and the significance thereof for media companies, whether they're film studios or newsrooms or whatever, to thrive. That one thing that has struck me in all of that is that when it comes to best practices and solutions and approaches and initiatives, a lot of them tend to individualize the situation. So there's a lot of talk about, promoting resilience or more positive coping mechanisms. And while that's incredibly important, and I totally support any, an ad agency giving you free counseling sessions, or I mean, of course, I mean, if it alleviates suffering and pain or makes you better able to help your colleagues, absolutely super important. At the same time, the struggles that people experience come from somewhere. It then not they don't tend to come from themselves. They come from the structure of the industry that they're part of and the way that industry sort of is used to working. And I know you've talked about that a lot in the past as well, about the significance of leadership, of an employer's ethical duty of care that you so beautifully articulated in interviews before. So, I mean, does that play a role in this report and in the summit? And if so, how are you attacking this?
Well, it plays a role in everything we do. At the
Right.
self-investigation, we have a systemic exchange approach that looks at the media industry and all the stakeholders that are part of the ecosystem and how could we support all the different stakeholders in their work and connect all those different stakeholders so that we could all advance the field to the
Right.
next level. So
Mm.
that means that we're working with academia. We work, for example, with the Reuters Institute at Oxford University, and we teach there and empower leaders on mental health awareness. We also work with unions, and that's why we're working with the European Federation of Journalists, and releasing soon this report is going to be called Stronger Minds, Stronger Media: Why Protecting Journalists' Mental Health is Essential for Journalism's Future. And it's going to be looking at the EU and, well, Europe more widely as well. And that's why we also work with media companies and individuals. So I think that we need to look at it again from a systems perspective, but let me just say it in a different way, which is there are several layers, right? It's at
Mm.
an individual level. What can I do, right? There's shared responsibility for caring, taking care of the media professionals' mental health. As a media professional, I can put some of my energy into it, right? So I can learn how to manage my stress, how to regulate my nervous system under like these hard circumstances that we live in and that we have to report on. So there are some tools I can acquire, some knowledge I can get for myself and in service of my journalism. But
Mm.
of course, I don't work in isolation. I work in a media company, right? So individual level, organizational level, right? The organization needs to take care of me, not only at moments of hardship, not only at moments of conflict, not only in moments where there is a complication or a complex story we're dealing with, but also at any other time. Many of the people are complaining about toxic workplaces, right? So, what are the practices that we have within journalism? What are the beliefs that we keep perpetuating that are not allowing us to be well at our jobs, right? And causing burnout and causing depression and really getting people to have more anxiety. So there's a duty of care of organizations, and then I would say like the industry, right? So us as a community, what can we do for each other? How can we support each other? How can we exchange best practices so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? And how could we really advance the conversation in a global way, right? And I think that that's something that we're really tackling as well. So we have resources at the Self-Investigation for Individuals, like a massive open online course on mental health and journalism that we did with the Knight Center
Mhm.
for Journalism in the Americas. Then we work directly with media companies and especially train managers, which is the key echelon of, of the pyramid to really
Right.
create change. And then we gather the community and promote that exchange of knowledge at an industry level with the Mental Health and Journalism Summit. So it is key that we all understand that we have a stake in the game and we
Mm.
can all do it, but it's not just at an individual level. We mostly it's at an organizational communal level.
How do you, and I'm sorry, I just want to pick your brain for a moment, if you forgive me, but how do we, one thing that I've always struggled to explain is that for an industry that is so reliant on its people to make it work, right? Without the creativity and innovation and imagination and joy of creative workers, there's no news stories, there's no investigative reporting, there's no amazing films or documentaries, there's no cool games to play, there's nothing. I mean, you can try to outsource all of that to AI and it won't work. So there's an industry that, and it also towards the outside world, the industry is, proud of its talent and absolutely celebrates creativity. But it's the same industry that just seems to be generally or historically fine with really treating its people incredibly poorly. And even more so, and that was for me one of the most shocking statistics in all of this, is what is sometimes called the churn or turnover, right? In the industry is that, yeah, it's relatively easy to go and work in the media as a journalist or whatever, because the industry realizes that whoever comes in will probably leave within 1 to 3 years as well, right? The turnover rate is so incredibly high because of, poor working circumstances. So, how do we explain that weird paradox between an industry that relies and promotes and celebrates the creativity and its talent, but then treats them horribly in the process. I mean, how do you get around that particular conundrum?
Passion. That's my answer. As a
That's
Spaniard, is a word I
see.
use a lot. But I think passion is great and it has a dark side.
Uh,
For so long, we've relied on passion, on this like desire to do the profession, desire to tell the story, desire to, uncover the truth. That has guided us for so long, and we've basically justified everything around it, you know?
sure.
So, this sentence of like, find the work or a job you love and
Mm,
you'll never work a day in your life,
mm,
And I think that in vocational professions such as journalism, but we're also seeing it in movies. We're also seeing it in cinema. You mentioned, I mean, you have a book about creative industries. So what can I
right.
tell you, right? Um, we've relied for so long on that fire,
Mm,
and fire burns. And that's what we're realizing. And now we're speaking publicly about it. It used to happen, but nobody spoke about it. So people kept dropping the profession without, speaking up.
yeah.
And now I think, again, thanks to the pandemic, we're starting to speak up and say, hey, there's something wrong here.
Mm,
And a lot of us are really working towards changing it, because it doesn't make sense that you have all these people loving their jobs so much, but at some point deciding to quit or deciding they need to take a break because it's been too much. So I would actually tweak that sentence. Find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life, as long as you take care of yourself while you do it and
mm.
you take care of each other while you do it.
Yeah, yeah. What does Sarah Jeffy says? Like, you can love your work, but if the work doesn't love you back, then yeah, you're gonna get miserable. And that's really powerful. That's really important. Maybe in conclusion, Mar, because I know you're like in the midst of getting everything organized and finishing the report and everything else. And again, thank you so much for taking this time out of that schedule. You mentioned before something that I've come across as well in my work that really inspired me. This notion of developing a mental health literacy, especially for people in leadership or managerial positions, right? The ability to appreciate when you or the people around you are struggling and knowing how to have that conversation. That mean that's at the minimum a starting point for that literacy. At the same time, I also want to acknowledge that from the research that I know, that most of us, just in general, are pretty bad at emotional, let alone mental health literacy. So, how do you get that started? Because when you advocate for mental health literacy, which I so completely support, I mean, how do you get that conversation started? Like, how does that look like? How do you get people to buy into this concept? That's sort of, I think that's a major breakthrough moment. But I wonder if you can shed a bit of light of how you tackle that.
Hmm. Well, this would be like an hour workshop. But let me just explain. First off, it's not just me saying this is important. It
Right.
is experts from around the world saying this is the course of action. If you want to learn more, I recommend that you go to the World Health Organization's website and look at mental health at work guidelines
Right.
done with the International Labor Organization. Not only the guidelines, but also the policy brief. They are great and explain what are the different steps and what to prioritize. And one of the things they say that you should prioritize only if you have like $1 to spend, €1 to spend, or if you have a little pot of money, spend it on training managers. Because again, this is like there's a cascade effect, right?
Mhm.
Um, it is really important not only to understand how you can regulate yourself and how you can manage your stress and how does your body work under stress and what is your window of tolerance and how to you can basically keep yourself healthy, mentally healthy and emotionally healthy. It is important that you do that for the others around you, right?
Mhm.
And that's why it is important that the leaders of today learn how to take care of their people and of themselves because middle managers are among the most at-risk population within workplaces, not just in the media. They tend to be the ones being burnt out. They tend to be the ones having mental health challenges. I was a middle manager. I burnt out. I know about it.
Right.
And then to take care of others, right? And think about issues such as, how do I know how my people are doing?
Mm.
How do I know if they're struggling? How do I know if they're overwhelmed with big workloads? How can I help them, support them adjusting their workload? How can I support them with whatever they need, right? And if you don't know, you don't have answers to those questions, that's the way to start, right? So I guess I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, because you asked me where to start.
Mm.
And you can start depending on where you're at as a professional and as an organization, you can start at different places.
Mm.
But know that, again, training managers should be the first course of action if you're a media organization. If you're a media manager, try to get training to understand how you can take care of yourself and others. Then, if you're a media organization, what have you done to train your staff? And what support mechanisms do you have to support your staff, not only on complex times or potentially traumatic situations such as war zones, difficult coverages, and so on, but on the day to day? And then finally, what are the different processes and protocols that you have to protect your people, and what are the benefits that you have? So you need to think on different levels and see what you're doing. And if you're in a media company that doesn't have any of that, the best course of action would be to try to find other people who are
Right.
convinced that this is an issue, that are tuned into this topic, try to join forces and try to elevate the conversation to the managers and to HR, to human resources as well. It's not always easy, Mark. I
Mm.
know a lot of people who are working in pretty toxic places. But right now, there's enough literature, there's enough research, there's enough case studies, there's enough examples that we can point to, so that you don't have to be alone and saying, I think it's a good idea. No, now you can say, oh, the Washington Post did it. Or, oh, this small media
Yes.
organization from Guatemala did it. Maybe we could, you
Right.
know? So I think that use others as an excuse to raise that conversation inside your organization.
Yeah, that's stunning. I mean, I remember reading older research reports on leaders in film and other companies that wanted to make a difference but didn't know A, where to start, and B, when they tried, they felt lonely. Like so they themselves felt unsupported because, of course, they weren't maybe taken seriously or there were no resources. But I think that's really, yeah, and your comment really makes me aware of that. That has shifted. You can't really say I'm all alone in wanting to do this because it's everywhere, and that's where the self-investigation comes in of yeah, combining all those resources, making that discussion visible so people can point to it and say, you see, this is happening in like 40 plus countries. Maybe we can have a go at this too. That's really powerful. Thank you so much, Mar, again for your time and for talking about this. I'm genuinely looking forward to the summit and to the report that's coming out soon. Stronger minds, stronger media. I love that. I think that's really powerful, and hope to see you again sometime soon.
Well, thank you, Mark, as well, for all the work that you do, because we need academia as well into this to really show with facts and good research that this is an issue and what can be done. So, thank you also for this interview, and sending a big kiss and hug to all of you who are listening. Thank you for taking the time to put this into your to do list today.